We are here celebrating Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. We knew we were going to get here at some point. This is okay. Jason Takes Manhattan represented the beginning, I think, of this steep slide downward, because I'll make a case that there was still something to be said for part 7, The New Blood. But once we get to the final Friday, which is technically Friday the 13th, part 9, wow. Now, this is part of our ongoing year-long look at the Friday the 13th franchise, which turns 40 this year. That's why we call it Friday the 40th. And in our last episode, we had special guest Peter Brackey, who wrote the book Crystal Lake Memories that we've been using as a guide. And we certainly used it as a guide, or at least I did, for this installment. I have a feeling there's a lot to talk about regarding this movie, but on the other hand, I feel like this movie isn't really worth talking about. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, as late cycle entries go, I mean, this one is so ridiculously, in my view, conceived. And as we know from all the digging that you and I probably both did, the execution has some really funny stuff to talk about. But the movies. I hate to put it this way, as I have the last few installments, but they just don't do anything for me at this point. But it's still fun to take them apart because they are so grandiose in their motivations and self-serious in their execution sometimes, that it can just be fun to go through what they were trying to do versus what we saw.
Yeah, and I think in this case, it's very strange because this is the most, I think, soap opera-y Friday the 13th we've ever watched. Partially that's because Adam Marcus and Dean Lorey, the director and screenwriter respectively, wanted to kind of get away from the campers just being hacked up at camp kind of a thing and focus on something that was more adult oriented. That's why that aside from not a reshoot, but kind of a pickup shoot, post principal photography, we didn't see any campers. It was all adults dealing with this weird drama about the Voorhees line, and there's like Jason had a sister and now he's body hopping and all this stuff, but it's like the youngest guy, I think, outside of the possible teens that we meet at that one camping scene, is like 25 years old. Everyone else is like in their 30s and 40s and upwards, and
Yeah.
that's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that if you're going to try and pull the rug out from underneath hardcore Jason fans, you really have to bring something special, and a 10-second teaser of Freddy versus Jason at the very end just doesn't quite cut it.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the age change in the movie, that it's aged upward, I mean, I guess you would just call it an equal opportunity massacre in a way.
Sure.
It's good. So the actors involved, it was certainly good for them. They all got paychecks. I was thinking about that line that Michael Caine had after he did Jaws, The Revenge, when he said, I've never seen the film, but I've seen the house that it paid for, and it's very nice. So I always think about that part of it.
I
But
don't think I think I had heard about that quote. I just never heard it. So that's brilliant.
yeah. So and probably very true. But somehow I think Michael Caine probably commanded a little bit more for Jaws: The Revenge than the actors did in this movie. But nonetheless, I mean, this movie is quite a trip. And I want to just build on something you said a moment ago, which is that the franchise now for the last 3 or 4 pictures has been very concerned with reinventing itself and going a new direction and so forth, and not doing the thing that made the franchise famous in the first place so much. Even though, of course, it would never have a Friday the 13th movie if we didn't have a dozen or more people killed. But the whole idea that we need to continue to build on it and do things like a telekinesis and move off to Manhattan and now in this case follow this kind of ridiculous traveling spirit or whatever you want to call it in this movie. I mean, this is the fun thing to think about, because the filmmakers in all of these cases were convinced that they had some truly novel idea that was going to expand the universe. And in fact, in my view, it just dissipates the fright of the whole thing. So
It does. And aside from a few spectacular but utterly ridiculous set pieces, like the introduction of Jason in this movie, where you start off thinking that it's a regular Friday the 13th movie. There's a young lady going up to Crystal Lake, and she's just taking a shower, and all of a sudden there's a noise outside, and she's being pursued by Jason. And then he gets blown up by the FBI or whoever. That's fun, but utterly stupid. Then you get the great morgue scene where the coroner is eating Jason's heart, which is kind of gross. Then we kind of settle into the movie, and I felt like I was watching episode 15 of a really boring, like, small town family TV show in which there was a subplot where there's a killer on the loose. Because all of these relationships are important to the people in the film, but I have no idea, no context for who's who and what's what. And it isn't until the very end where I kind of piece things together. And by then I really didn't care.
Yeah.
There's John D. LeMay's character. He plays Stephen Freeman.
Yep.
John D. LeMay, by the way, is the only actor to cross over from the Friday the 13th TV series to the movies, which was kind of fun. I was a big fan of that TV show, as we've kind of mentioned before. And so I was a big thrill to see him in a Jason movie, but to see him in this Jason movie, he's the ex-boyfriend of Carrie Keegan's character, Jessica, the father of Jessica's baby, but they're no longer together. And Jessica has moved on to be with the talk show host played by Stephen Culp of a America's Most Wanted kind of sensationalist news magazine program that's, highlighting Jason Voorhees. The guy's offered a bounty for Jason's head, which is being pursued by Creighton Duke, played by Stephen Williams, also from TV, from 21 Jump Street, who's this crazy bounty hunter. And then you introduce the idea of Jason Voorhees having a sister that nobody knew about, and this whole bloodline thing, and winding up with the Book of the Dead and the dagger from the Evil Dead movies for some reason. The crate from Creepshow winds up as a prop in the background. For a movie that sounds as nuts as that is, it's really boring because the soapy stuff takes up, like, I swear, 60 out of the 90-minute running time.
Yeah, I mean, you forgot about the hidden Night of the Creatures.
Night of the Creeps, yeah, very
So
good.
we have that, and then we also have in there some iconic imagery that, in my view, comes directly out of Hellraiser, which is the resurrection of the bodies in Hellraiser. If you remember, they in the attic, they grow up from the floor, and there are all these bloody tangle of tissues, and we have that moment too with the cop late in the movie as he's disintegrating, where he's lying on the floor, and it looks like it could be an outtake from Hellraiser. This movie is so derivative of other much better movies with its imagery, which is not to take away from the great special effects by Greg Nicotero, which are admittedly good, but the movie itself collapses with all the derivative stuff and the soap opera stuff that you talk about, and it's also interesting that they created this family drama in the middle of the movie because I'm always interested in filmmakers who think they're doing one thing and it actually looks like to the audience something else. So when we look into the stories of how they made the movie, what they intended to happen, and that we would care, about the family in the movie, and that there were adult concerns, and we didn't have teenagers in the movie. I mean, it's as flat as anything, and as superficial as anything. And some would just say, who cares? You guys get over it. I mean, it's a Friday the 13th movie, but it's kind of a slapdash movie, even for a Friday the 13th movie.
And one of the things that, I had read about this in Crystal Lake Memories. I think I'd heard about it years ago, but I hadn't read the full story. And then watching the film again, I was really conscious of it. The scene I mentioned that was sort of the pickup post-principal photography shoot was of Steve driving down the road at night. He encounters three campers, two girls and a guy, and a pizza place. Sorry. Gives them a lift to Camp Crystal Lake and then drops them off. They go tent out. Two of them go off to have sex, and then they all get horribly murdered. That was not in the original screenplay.
Right.
It was a studio note after they'd seen the rough cut of the film saying, we need this to be more like Friday the 13th. And I'm thinking, how the hell did this movie function at all as a Friday the 13th style movie without that? Like, it's strange because it's like a weird sci-fi. Yeah, it's Night of the Creeps. It's the hidden. It is completely not a Jason movie after the first 2 minutes. And I don't know how anyone thought, who obviously cared about this, or fans of the material, right? But to not have any stalk and slash, camping scenes. It's just so odd.
I mean, it's very strange. And in fact, there was a much longer cut of the movie, I think, where there was all this domestic stuff where Aaron Gray's character and the cop were engaged and they were going to go off on honeymoon together and the whole bit. And then, as you know, the director, Adam Marcus, who was just a wet behind the ears first time director,
23. Yeah.
23, was really trying to do something different and move away from that Campers in the Woods formula, and the studio pushed that back in at the 11th hour. But that's actually, for me, the best moment in the movie. I mean, that special effect is like fantastic. If there's anything we can say about it, it's a fantastic moment and totally believable what happens inside the tent. And so that gives the movie a real lift, in my view. Otherwise,
Literally.
otherwise, it's tonally just all over the map in a way. Even Adam Marcus even said that he thought they were aiming for the Terminator was on the table for them. I'm like, you guys, you're making a Friday the 13th movie. Like, what is all this? So I'm glad that scene is in the movie. And as I mentioned earlier, the special effects in the movie are pretty damn good at times, even when they're doing things you never thought you would see in a Friday the 13th movie, like that squiggly creature going up the legs of the model of Aaron Gray. So I don't know how that fits into the lore of Friday the 13th, but I guess when you're dealing with the supernatural, you can do anything you want. And we've learned that in the series. So that's what they did.
And that's the thing. Like, I feel like, well, let's just get back to the beginning. When this thing opens and there's that news reel that we kind of talked about, the profile of Jason Voorhees, he's on the FBI's most wanted list. Yeah. Everybody in America knows about this guy. So the FBI has been hunting down a zombified, unkillable, wrecking machine for however many decades. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Now, I like the idea of Creighton Duke, and I think as Stephen Williams plays him, completely, he looks cool. He kind of has this aura of cool, but every time he opens his mouth, he says something completely nuts, which is wonderful. But I feel like we've had sort of not exactly a bounty hunter, but a hunter of Jason before, back in the final chapter.
Yes.
I feel like there's a missed opportunity here to kind of expand on that idea and say, okay, what if it wasn't just the, college-age brother of one of Jason's victims? What if it was a serious guy who had twigged that there was somebody stalking these woods and wanted to set up an actual trap? You think about Halloween 2018, where Jamie Lee Curtis goes into full survivalist mode. Yeah. That would have been really neat in just the context of a regular Jason movie. But when you add this spiritual element, which I feel like they didn't specifically reference it, but in the poster for this movie with the snake thing coming out of the silver hockey mask, that felt straight out of the Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, where it turns out Freddy Krueger also had made a deal with these monsters. Whether that's a connection, some way to kind of tie these in together for the Freddy versus Jason movie that they really wanted to make, I don't know. But it felt derivative, it felt sloppy, and I just feel like this movie could have actually been something cool, maybe in the hands of someone who was at least, say, 27
and a half.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we all know this was the transition of the franchise away from Paramount to New Line, and along came with that the idea that there would be the Freddy versus Jason movie, but the timing was off. As people know, because Wes Craven had gone off to make a new Nightmare at the time, and so here was Sean Cunningham trying to figure out, well, gee, we have the rights. So what else could we do with it? So this is how this movie kind of came to be, in the interim period there. And in fact, at the end of the movie, as you know, there's a direct nod to Freddy with his arm coming out of the grave, as it were, or whatever you want to call it. So that just tells us in a way that this is all a big joke and a kind of studio inside joke. So yeah, I mean, this is a movie that has more than any of them so far, like a kitchen sink mentality to it that doesn't quite know what it is. I think it thinks it does, but on screen, what's on screen? I mean, the proof is always what's on screen. It's not the motivations of the filmmakers. It's what they actually delivered that translates, and none of what they were intending to deliver, in my view, really delivers in this movie. And that being said, I mean, it's still a watchable movie, and there's some fun about it, I suppose, and the whole idea of the traveling spirit is cool. But I think the movie really loses a point of view of the killer, because without Jason in the movie, except for just flashes. And then, of course, at the end when he's reborn or whatever you want to call about it, it's or whatever you want to call it, it's not necessarily very tense to just see an average 5'5" police officer, as temporarily as the killer or whoever it may be. So I think there's a real lack of tension in the suspense sequences because there's no physical intimidation.
And I think part of it is the inconsistency, not only with the bodies that he jumps into and their behavior, but also with Jason himself. Because when we first meet him, he does things in this film that he's not really done before. He groans. He actually makes noises with his mouth. When he first lashes out at the girl who turns out to be the FBI agent in the beginning, I think he swings an axe or a knife or something, and she dodges it, and you can hear him exerting force, going, "Ugh!" That never happens. When those rockets are coming down on him, he's getting shot to death by the FBI agents. He's going, "Ugh, ugh, ugh, ugh." That's so, I don't know what that is. Plus, the look of him, he looks almost like someone tried to make a fat version of the Jason from the Friday the 13th video game from NES. He's in almost like this faded purple jumpsuit he's so round. Like, I know it's Kane Hodder, but I aside from the puffiness of the mask, which I really kind of appreciate the effects team trying to make it look like this mask had been welded to his face and all these tumors have been kind of growing over it. That's neat, but I don't think it should translate to the rest of his body because he looks funnier than imposing.
Yeah.
I don't believe that he could have jumped out of the floor like he did in that climax with that physique. But also, if it's Jason Voorhees and he's jumping from body to body, a lot of the bodies he jumps into are also silent killers. At the very end of the film, when this becomes a matter of convenience and there's two cops who show up, and I believe it's Carrie Keegan fending them off, one of them is like, "I'm here to help you." And she's like, "How do I know you're not Jason?" And the other person is like, "I'm not Jason either." So he's like he's having conversations with her. How is that even possible?
Yes. Yeah,
So
that's
dumb.
true. I hadn't thought about that, but as I said earlier, there are no rules to this. It's just sort of make it up as you go, and that's what it feels like. Look, I mean, we probably should also mention the creation of the deepening of the lore of the Jason Voorhees story, which is goes to completely absurd levels here. I mean, trying to cast Jason Voorhees as I don't know, a Michael Myers type legend. There's even the Voorhees house, like the Myers house, and Halloween. And according to Adam Marcus, I mean, this was just an attempt to create a psychological profile, and he even referenced, Psycho and Halloween and other movies that created profiles because that obviously gives the killer complexity, and so they were attempting to do that here. But this whole idea of well, Jason had a sister and, now he has a niece and, all of this sort of stuff is just so bizarre. I mean, if you were going to come up with a family angle, why ape the angle that was used in Halloween to start with? And secondly, it just seems so like such a letdown in this movie. Okay, so basically so now we have these three people who can, what is it they say they can do in the movie? I mean, they can either kill him or have the power to resurrect him
Yeah,
or whatever the case is.
if they stab him in the heart with this special ceremonial dagger, I feel dumb saying it, then they can kill him forever. But if he is able to get his little worm demon thing into their body, dead or alive, it turns out, then he can be reborn and potentially just go on being unstoppable.
I mean, where does the worm demon thing come from anyway? I mean, when it pops out of that neck near the end of the movie, it's sort of like, okay, I mean, I get it. I mean, I know we're in the realm of the supernatural and we can kind of do whatever we want, as we mentioned a minute ago, but suddenly we're in a creature feature, which has never been Friday the 13th stock and trade, right?
Right. And again, it's a cool effect. It reminds me very much of The Thing, because like the head, when it kind of cocks off and this thing is crawling out of the neck, the head is still kind of like contort, or the face is contorting and all this other stuff. It's very much The Thing. And then it's scurrying around the room. And that reminds me even more of The Evil Dead, with those kind of critters scurrying around the cabin. It's just at this point, I get the feeling the effects team cared because they were being paid to, execute something, even though it didn't make sense. But yeah, from a narrative standpoint, I really would have just liked to have seen some more half naked campers getting creatively killed.
Yeah.
It really is
I
a
mean,
case for not messing with the formula.
or, how about just rebuild the movie around someone I'm very happy to have call a friend, Rusty Schwimmer, who's so good in the movie as Stevie B. And
It's it's
you
it's
know,
Joey
probably the
B.
only Joey B. I'm sorry, Joey B. Yes. That's a lot of fun. I mean, so again, like, I don't want to knock all their decisions, because at least they made some creative casting choices that weren't originally intended, and at least that pays off, because when you have someone like Rusty Schwimmer in your movie, they're self-directed, and they can deliver a character, a real kind of character in a way, however goofy it is, in this movie. So that was fun to see her in it. But I agree with you. I mean, I think the direction of the movie should have just been steered somewhere. I mean, I don't know why it was steered into the creature feature, if it was because they knew they had a great effects team or otherwise, but maybe they should have just steered it more towards the human drama of some of the capable actors like Rusty Schwimmer that they have in the movie. So I think there was an unexplored opportunity here, and Adam Marcus said something interesting about this movie in Crystal Lake Memories. He said, "Look, I guess what I would like to do is ask fans to really sit down and do some thinking, and question why they just want the same thing over and over and over. And when we attempt to do something different, nobody sort of wants that. If they want the same thing over and over, we have VHS tapes or home video copies of all the old movies. Just watch those. Instead of making a new one, we can just watch the old ones over and over." So he was essentially defending his decision in the movie, to take it in a totally different direction, which is fair enough. I would just say, if you're going to do that, then execute that vision in a compelling way, because this movie didn't do it.
The compelling part is the key, because I understand his argument, but it's kind of unfair, because it gives a pass to the people making the thing that's supposed to revolutionize the product. You could say, I'm really tired of eating McDonald's cheeseburgers day after day after day. Oh, I'm going to revolutionize this. I'm going to give you something different. And they hand me a plate of, rotten beef on moldy bread. Yeah, it's different, but it's terrible. And I would rather just go back to that comfort food that I know and love and stimulates all the right parts of my brain. Um, you mentioned I'm sorry, the reason I corrected you on the Joey B thing, and I
Yeah.
didn't mean to sound harsh, but
Oh no.
that was the one thing that came close to being a theory for this
Yeah.
film. And I don't know if there's any way to reference this without talking to Marcus or Lori. Joey B, that's the name of the diner that they congregate at, and that's the name of Rusty Schwimmer. She's the owner.
Yeah.
I wondered why they would call this place Joey B's, even outside the fact that there's a character named that. Someone had to create the name of that character. It's a Friday the 13th movie, and that name just it stuck out like a splinter in my mind. Joey B, think Joey Burns, the kid from Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, who got killed over the candy bar.
You know what? I'm just going to go with this one. I mean, I'm more than happy to. I mean, this movie is, like we said, is anything goes. So why not? Let's bring them on, bring the theories on, and that sounds plausible to me. So.
And well, thank you for humoring me there. But again, I could, yeah, you could have an entire like sitcom or a short film about this diner in Camp Crystal Lake, because when we first meet these characters, like Leslie Jordan plays Joey B's husband. I think they're married. Um, she's like talking, and they have a teenage, I guess, son who's working the grill. They're having a Jason burger special. It's 2 for 1, and she goes over to the grill and pokes some eyes out of the hamburger patty to make a hockey mask. And she's like, "Use the leftover meat. There you go, 2 for 1." That's great, and that's really funny, and it's kind of inventive. And unfortunately, we don't see any of that kind of tongue-in-cheek levity in any of this other stuff. Like, we're stuck with this again boring adult drama. And in
Yeah.
that last the diner confrontation scene, which Marcus had said he wanted to model after the Terminator police station massacre, um, I felt bad for Joey B and for Leslie Jordan's character, who was I'm looking this up, darn it. I had it right here, but anyway, for his character, he gets dumped in a fryer. She gets whacked in the mouth, and I guess the idea is her jaw gets completely turned inward so she can't breathe. Is
So
that the impression you got?
you know what I mean? As I was taking another look at this movie, because I haven't been watching this one over the years, like I've watched the earlier ones. I had to actually watch Rusty's death scene several times because I couldn't see what was happening. I mean, it happens very quickly, and I mean, it looks as if. I mean, something happens. I mean, it's like either the friar makes an indentation on her face or something like that. I'm gonna have to ask her next time I talk to her what exactly happened. But I never could quite tell what happened. I mean, she just sort of is very quickly dispatched, and it's dark. I mean, it's dark in that the kitchen area where she is. I mean, the funny part about that is that the friars were, as you know, filled with root beer.
Root beer, right?
Like bubbling root beer. Sometimes you don't want to know things about production stories about films because they forever change the way that you look at the movie, which is why I never watched the documentary on The Shining a couple years ago that had all the fan theories.
Oh,
Movie 37. So I didn't want to watch that because I knew if I ever went back and which I do watch The Shining once a year, probably I would not be able to get those weird theories out of my head. That's part of my own OCD problem, I think. But in this case, to know that was root beer actually enhances the scene because there's really nothing else of interest going on there. So
well,
that's one of the benefits of doing all the research in the last 3 or 4 movies is that it has actually helped the movies be more interesting.
and that's an excellent point because Leslie Jordan's story about what was going on in his life while they were
Right.
filming that scene is better than anything in the last like 3 Friday the 13th movies.
I know. I mean, I'd like to see a movie about that. I mean, that would be interesting, so.
Right. There was like this weird domestic drama and he had been up for I think days dealing with it and going to set, and Adam Marcus was trying to get this shot. And it's weird because looking at the final shot, I'm like, did they just use one of the earlier takes? Did he go through all this Kubrickian nonsense for nothing? Because there's nothing complicated or overly dramatic or cool about it. It's just a guy going to a friar and he kind of like a little bit and then it's done. But yeah, for fans of, I would recommend that they read the book and not necessarily watch the documentary because I don't think that story is in the documentary portion. That's only on the pages. But yeah, it's good stuff, and I felt really bad for him. Even knowing that story and then going in and watching this film, the second Leslie Jordan shows up on the screen, I'm thinking, oh, all this other stuff's going on. He's holding it all in and giving a great performance. I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't funny in any way, shape, or form, but the idea that is some who are watching may not know that he was actually in real life shot with a crossbow. That would have made a better moment in the movie than many of the other moments that are in the movie. So don't hate me for saying that, but that was the first thing I thought when I read it. I thought, oh, that would be back to a traditional Friday the 13th moment. But more power to him because he persevered on the set and the details of what he was going through were way out there. I mean, there would be and for anybody to cope with under any circumstances, but to be on this crazy movie set, coping with them was Herculean job for him. So
yeah, and yeah, it's that kind of humanity. And I don't know if it sounds like when he opened up for the interview with the book, that might have been the first time he really talked about it. But that's the kind of thing that's kind of utterly lacking from this movie is any kind of humanity or nuance. They fill it with a lot of this, soapy conflict, but I never really felt like I was watching people. I thought I was watching actors who are paid to do a job, and they were kind of all bored by it. I mean, even Carrie Keegan, I had forgotten that she was the heroine of this movie. I always think of the effects or the Freddy coming up at the end to grab the mask. I never think of the final girl in this movie, and this is not a knock on her, but I think it's because her character is so unremarkable that I just look at her and I just see generic movie person.
I mean, her main point of interest in this film is that she's a mother. I mean, to a newborn, or I forget how old the baby is in the film, but that's how she is, and she's not given much else to do except sort of run around and try to figure out what the hell is going on by the end of it. But it's funny again when you think about what they were really going for, which is Adam Marcus said he wanted to humanize the character of or make the character of the mother complex enough, and that even extended to him trying to goad her into doing nudity because moms are never allowed to be sexy in the movies. So let's do it in Friday the 13th, Part 9. So we're going to break new ground. Here's one for the moms, so basically, she just doesn't have much going on in the movie. Now that said, she's got a little pluck in the movie, and I thoroughly enjoyed everything that she said in the interview that she gave to Peter around the dynamics on set and how she came to the role, and her relationship with Adam and with Sean Cunningham, and her relationship to the movie. Even seeing the movie publicly, she had some very funny remarks about what it was like to hear how people reacted to her character when she would just sit in the movie theater. I thought that was all really fun. And as you know, as we've seen in a couple of the histories, more than a couple of the histories of all the movies preceding this, there was an onset war about who was going to do nudity and how much, and who could persuade who to do it, and whose agent got involved. And this is standard par for the course on Friday the 13th, even though there is other nudity, as we know, in the film, which was put in later, probably to compensate for the fact that Carrie didn't do it. But it's all a very interesting story. I just think the modus operandi of this series is so interesting, that we get these actresses in the movie who signed to do the movie, who in some cases are hired because they have a director who just loves the way they look, like Darcy DeMoss and Danny Steinman on Part 5. And then once we get them signed for the movie, we do everything we can to kind of coerce them to take off their clothes, even though they've stated verbally or otherwise, I'm not going to do it. So the dynamic breaks down on the set, and it's just funny because the nudity in these movies is always gratuitous. I mean, it's just thrown in the movie so that it can be titillation for the audience. But in this case, Adam Marcus actually had the balls in the interview to say that it was a noble thing, because moms are not allowed to be sexy in the movies, and he wanted to bring that to the huge Friday the 13th audience at this point, and make some kind of social statement. So I just got a big kick out of that.
And I think I don't doubt his sincerity, but there's a disconnect, I think, because there's so much weird, incongruous stuff going on, that I had almost completely forgotten about her as a mother character, except in the scenes when she's like running with the baby, or she's going somewhere because she's got to get the baby or save the baby, whatever. That connection was lost, especially after having read that interview. I again was watching the movie. Okay, here's the shower scene. Where's the big emotive, like, we're gonna have one for the moms? She doesn't. This is going to come across terribly. She doesn't look like a mom. She just looks like, you could have told me she was a mom. You could have told me she was a space alien. She just looked like a blonde lady in the shower, strategically placed so you wouldn't pick up on any nudity. There was no grand moment for her character that was revealed in that shower. So
that's really funny, Ian. I mean, because I think the same thing, but Adam Marcus, again, I mean, these quotes are too good to be true, so we have to share them with people who haven't read the book. But Adam Marcus actually fancied that scene in the movie as being some kind of emotionally complex moment. He was envisioning that it was going to rival the scene in The Big Chill where Glenn Close has her emotional breakdown in the shower. He actually referenced The Big Chill. So we've got The Big Chill, and then we've got The Hidden a few minutes later on Hellraiser. So I guess it all sort of goes together. But you mentioned space aliens. I mean, if you're going to throw in some allusion to motherhood in the movie, why not have some integrity around it, like we had in Aliens with Sigourney Weaver with the face-off, and the whole character of Carrie Henn, and the whole wonderful confrontation with the mother alien and all the eggs. I mean, this is the stuff of like movie history, because James Cameron knew what he was doing. Now this movie totally blows an opportunity to do that, because even though Erin Gray appears in the movie, a terrific actress that a lot of us loved in Buck Rogers and other things, and she plays
Silver Spoons.
Silver Spoon. She plays Carrie's mom in the movie. There's really nothing there. There's no generational handoff, mother to new mother. As far as I can remember, there's no nurturing scenes of the newborn in the movie that would create a strong pull of motherhood at all. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a totally blown opportunity, even though we had two mothers in the movie. So,
and that's something else I picked up on is, and maybe this is a testament to the evergreen Erin Gray. She didn't look like she could be the mother to someone who's supposed to be like in her mid-20s, maybe older sister or something like that. In fact, I had forgotten that connection. So when the movie started and they introduced her character, part of I think what you're talking about is the fact that she only has like 10 minutes of screen time. She's killed off very early on, until her corpse is violated later. Jesus. Um, but yeah, I that if they had spent more time, you get more of a sense of motherhood and daughterhood from the Jarvis family in the final chapter. You know, five movies earlier than you get in this movie that's ostensibly about that very theme. It's just very strange.
I mean, the absolute prototype scene in the entire series, of course, related to motherhood, is Betsy Palmer's monologue in the original Friday the 13th, before it's completely revealed that she's the killer in the film, and she's thinking in her memory about her sweet innocent son, as she says in that scene. I mean, this is what happens when you put a great actress. With words that are pretty basic, she can actually make something emotional and grounded and real out of it. And this is not a knock on Erin Gray, because she's not given anything like that to do, and Erin Gray is a terrific actress. So this, I think what Adam Marcus was going for, I mean, what they're often going for is the kind of stuff that you get when you have somebody like Betsy Palmer delivering stuff like that, and it's not in the series very often that we have that sort of stuff. So it doesn't really make sense. It just and Erin Gray playing the mother again. I agree with you. I mean, okay, so maybe she had a baby when she was 14 or 15, and we can just
Seriously.
apply a theory to the movie that says that she was a young mom, and there's a whole story, and maybe because this movie was so domestic heavy, that subplot's on the cutting room floor somewhere. Who knows? But it just doesn't really work. I mean, there's no point for them to be mother and daughter. And in fact, Carrie Keegan, whom I like enough in the movie, I mean, I always find it curious in films when people's relatives are killed, and then the very next scene they're just moving on. So this happened, I think, a couple movies ago. One of the mothers was killed in the woods, if you remember, and
Mrs.
the body,
Shepherd, yeah.
yeah, the body's discovered, and then would just move on. So I mean, I think any of us would say that if that were us in the situation, and it were a relative of ours, and thank God it isn't, we would be so devastated. We'd either want to kill ourselves, or we'd lethargically trudge through days, weeks, months, years, whatever after. But everybody in these movies just seems to, look at significant other, mother, family member killed, and they just move right on. And I find that really interesting continuity disconnect in movies like this. It's not just the Friday the 13th movies. It's in all movies, and maybe that's because movies are not shot in sequence. So sometimes you're shooting the later scenes earlier and the earlier scenes later, and as an actor, you're not always following the through line. But I always just am looking for emotion from actors after people that are important are killed in the movie, and they just kind of they just go on, and that happens in this movie.
I do, and that brings me to something that I was thinking of when we were talking about the baby. If the young child, and I don't remember the baby's name, had been, say, not a newborn, but like 5 or 6 years old, then you could have done something like the threat of Jason getting into this sentient kid's body. It
Mhm.
might have gone the route of like Pet Cemetery or something, but even that, why not? How devastating would that be to know the world's most notorious undead serial killer is now occupying the body of your child? You got this little murderous little Jason running around. There's a
It
way
would
to
be
pull it
fun.
off. It sounds dumb, but it's better than what we have here.
That would be fun. I mean, it might be pretty easy to subdue a toddler or a child, but nonetheless, it would be fun. Maybe you could get creative with it, and when we could depart from the traditional elements of the series.
Maybe now there's the one scene where the sheriff's deputy is getting ritually shaved before the transfer of the slug. Now, I hadn't picked up on this until watching it this time, but I always thought, okay, maybe they need to shave the sheriff's deputy because he had a giant mustache and the mouth has to be open and clean in order for the transfer to happen. But the coroner guy who puts the slug into him also has a mustache. Maybe it's because he ate the heart and that's how the thing got into him and he needs something clean for the transfer, but it just seemed really gratuitous and strange, almost like a David Lynchian like departure from Marcus to say, "Oh, I can make my movie artsy and weird."
I mean, I thought it was weird not only that he was being shaved, but that he was stripped and he seems to be wearing some kind of leather underwear or something, which is weird. And he's strapped down with leather straps. I mean, I think you know where I'm going with this. We're this side of William Friedkin's cruising in this scene, which is very, very bizarre, combined with the male nudity in the movie too. I don't know what is up with that, because that's not normal for this movie, with the scene that precedes the tent, which is very quick, but certainly the scene in the tent too. There's something very weird about that scene where he's strapped down. I know Adam Marcus said, look, this was a scene that audiences reacted very strongly to also. So it's not just us who were reacting to that. But if you're going to shave somebody's face, I don't know why you need to strip them down and put them in leather underwear on a table, looking like it's part of a ritual.
Yeah, so many questions. Um, Now, one thing, they had cut out at the end when Jason actually gets sucked into hell. I guess they had actually built some creatures and some miniatures to show actual demons involved in this. Him taking it, the whatever entity was coming up from the ground was pulling Jason down. We saw some demon faces, but what
Yep.
we're left with are these giant, like Muppet tree hands. It's the goofiest looking thing. I don't know if it's because I was watching it in high def this time or what, but I was like, this looks awful. How did this get past anybody?
Yeah, I think thankfully they're kind of fleetingly shown, when we see them. But it's funny what you mentioned about high def. I mean, it certainly reveals things that you that wouldn't otherwise be revealed. I don't know what those things are. Again, I think it's sort of like anything goes. The demons of hell could look any which way. We just don't know. And I hope to never find out. So I. I think that's what they were doing there. In that particular scene, I think is okay. I mean, it's visually kind of cool. The way they walk away from that scene is cool. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a miss in the movie, the like lightning bolts and stuff, which are sort of Highlander-esque cliche or something of the time, in a way, particularly at the beginning, the electricity volts that sort of go into the body in the morgue and so forth. And then there's the ones that come out of the sky, the whole thing at the end. So it's a little weird. I don't quite know what they were up to, but maybe they were like, this movie sucks, and we need to throw in a bunch of special effects here at the end of it to try to send people out on a high note. But I don't really know what all that means. I wish I did, but yeah, they're pretty weird.
Well,
And
and
then
that
the whole like, I mean, straw that breaks the camel's back is the green and red sweater with the knives coming up out of the ground, which basically just tells us this is all a big put on. This is just a silly producers put on in a way. At least that's how I read it.
Well, and you can also tell that it was sort of an afterthought, which, much like the camping scene that we mentioned earlier, I can't imagine what people thought this movie was going to be before they added that scene, because the Freddy scene was, they came up with that, I think, during filming. That wasn't in the original script.
Yeah.
So without that, what, Jason just gets sucked into hell and the heroes walk off into the sunset? What, literally, what the hell? And also, when the arm comes up, again, this is a high def thing, I think, because I'd never seen it before. You get a glimpse of the skin between the glove and the sweater, and it's just regular flesh. It's not burned or charred or anything. I'm like, come on, guys, you're not even trying here.
But this is funny because I was watching a movie the other night called Schizoid with Klaus Kinski, and when the killer is revealed, there's just simply no way that the killer was the person who was committing those kills in the movie. I mean, physically, there's no way when you see hands and arms and things like that. And of course, that was the case in the original Friday the 13th as well, with the man's hand slashing Robbie Morgan's neck, of course. And all of this stuff was obviously not Betsy Palmer, so I think they just don't give a shit. And this is sort of like, look, this is a cheap, low budget production. It's what you call schlock, in a way, and we only have time to do one take. And yes, we saw the rest, but nobody else will see it. So I think that's what happened here, and it's certainly, as I said, not just in the Friday the 13th series, but there's real continuity breaks like this, and there's intentional stuff in this movie because Kane Hodder is certainly not continuing. 95% of the movie as any sort of Jason characters. So as you know, Kane Hodder had the right idea, which was to create a kind of a physical through line across all who were possessed, as it were, by Jason. How would they move? What signature Jason moves could they all incorporate that would tell the audience that this was indeed something that could be sold as a traveling spirit through different bodies? And nobody really does in the movie either. There's no continuity on that front either. You would think there would be movies that often, as you know, have characters in the past and present that are played by different actors. The actors really work together to make sure that they integrate either how they speak or what their physicality is like or otherwise. And this movie is just a free-for-all. No, there's no resemblance between any of the versions of Jason when he's inside of those bodies. I mean, they just are really, I mean, the actors, that as they were before, they were possessed in the movie, acting possessed. So that's a continuity break too. So I think continuity isn't really the strong suit in this film.
In that case, it's less a problem with the screenplay or the filmmakers. It's more the actors. Because I remember reading about Kane Hodder talking about how he was really lobbying to have that continuity that you mentioned and talking to the actors. I think Stephen Culp was particularly dismissive. He was like, yeah, Kane kept talking about how I should move like Jason. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, it's just that Hodder is a real, and not just because he's playing the character, but he was a real fan of the material and of this kind of legacy he was building up on his film resume, that just to have that enthusiasm around, I would think that as an actor, it's like having someone that invested in what you're trying to do, especially if you're playing a character that you're sort of the custodian of that character that someone else has built, there'd be a little bit more respect. And I just want to give Kane Hodder a hug, because I just imagine him like sitting in his, director's chair or whatever off to the side crying, like, no one will listen to me.
I know. I mean, this guy has got a cameo in this movie. They were nice enough to give him a cameo at the beginning of the movie, as you know. So he actually appears as Kane Hodder with his face as a security guard in the movie. So that's good that he had the opportunity. But I think, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, this was a weird direction to take to eliminate Kane Hodder, who, I guess you could say that regardless of what these films do or don't do, Kane Hodder created a character who is kind of a hulking menace in a way that has been pretty consistent in the latter half of the series. To remove that one constant from the movie is kind of a fatal blow in a way to this movie. Although it was nice to see Kane Hodder kind of looking like himself. I thought for a minute that even he's got just a couple lines and he's kind of charming. I thought maybe he could have had a career as an strongman actor in the movies if he wanted to. I mean, and there was no shortage, of course, in the 80s of movies that, for example, Michael Dudikoff would star in that were Avenging Force movies or American Ninja or many of these movies that called upon somebody who had the physique of a Kane Hodder, who could do all the stuff that he obviously can do. And he would have, when I looked at him in this movie, I thought he would have fit really well into just as Kane Hodder in any number of exploitation, action, jungle, Rambo clone, sci-fi, Terminator ripoff, all of those films. I mean, there were hundreds of those movies. So he could have had a career other than just being Jason on camera with his face.
Yeah, well, I don't know what opportunities were denied to him, or if he was just kind of into doing this thing. I feel like he probably is feeling pretty okay. On a related note, I did see him acting sort of not as himself, but as a human character in Hatchet 2. And no, not so much. But before we go, because I feel like we're kind of winding down here, one of the fun things about this series is we occasionally bring out little bits of fandom ephemera that we've collected over the years. I dug this out right before we got on the air. The Jason Goes to Hell Friday the 13th comic book from 1993 with Topps trading cards. It was from, I believe, the now defunct Topps Comics.
Hey, how much was that? Is there like a price on the cover of it, or?
It was in 1993, $2.95.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is picking up, but it's a glow-in-the-dark cover, so you could turn off the lights and see Jason's sort of hockey mask glow back at you.
Is there comic book nudity in there? Is that for mature audiences, or?
Nothing about this movie is for mature audiences. But no, I thumbed through right before we got on, and no, it's for teenagers, so it's tastefully done. Of course, there's graphic violence and everything. I think there's more graphic
Oh, but
violence
that's okay.
in this movie, in the comic book, than there is in the actual movie. Um, that's one thing I do want to touch on. There is an unrated cut of this that I can't find anywhere. I assume it's going to be on the Shout box set next month, but I had to rent the R-rated version. I checked a bunch of digital platforms. At first, I thought I had this thing like on my shelf at some point, but I think I might have sold the DVD years ago. But the R-rated cut, I don't remember there being a huge difference in the amount of gore, particularly when the waitress in the diner scene gets her brain shoved, like it pops out of the top of her head, much like an effect that they did in part 6 with the sheriff's deputy
Yeah.
that they completely cut out. I was just fascinated that that made it through the MPAA because it's one of the most
Really?
disturbing things I've seen.
I mean, it's so interesting. I think it just has to do with the year that we're in and the mood of how they're feeling and who's in it at the moment. And it's funny because you can get away with some just incredibly graphic stuff one year, and the next year everything is cut out of the movie and lost forever, or not, as we know with the upcoming Friday the 13th Part 2. So I think it just happens to be whether the MPA gods are smiling on you that year or whatever the case is, and that is just a very interesting thing to consider because there really is not that much of a difference sometimes between, in fact, some of the things that have been completely cut out are so benign compared to the brain eating in this movie and the slicing of the body completely in half and then the tent. I mean, these are some of the most extreme moments that have been in a movie, even including the creature crawling up the between Aaron Gray's or the model's legs. I mean, this is really graphic, suggestive, and some of it really suggestive stuff that they might take the hacksaw to, but they didn't. I mean, somehow it passed, and I looked at the R-rated version, of course, as well, and I didn't have the movie on my shelf either. I rented the movie. Actually, I'm ashamed to say that I bought it because it was $4.99, and to rent it was $3.99. So now I can watch it, whenever I want to.
Woohoo!
20 years from now, when it has a reappraisal and it's considered a great work of horror art, I'll have it in my queue. But nonetheless, I mean, as an R-rated film, it's it's got great special effects. So that's the one thing we can give credit to Greg Nicotero, who did an excellent job with presenting the effects of a horror film. I mean, these are really good effects. So that part of it is good. But the rest of it, I mean, the audiences voted with their dollars, and I mean, it made 17. Was it 17 or 15 million? 17 million maybe, which was low, and so it was what it was, right?
Yeah, and it was disappointing. I think it still did well enough, but it was not the blockbuster I think New Line had in mind, where they're like, okay, we've got the Jason franchise, we can do anything we want with it, and then it just kind of lands with a thud, which
Yep.
explains why it was another 7 or so years between Jason movies. And we'll be talking about Jason X, aka Jason in Space, next month, and I'm kind of excited about that for a number of reasons, but one of them is which I can't wait to go back and watch it because I've always had a very soft spot in my heart for Jason X, and I hope I still have that when I watch it again and not just turn all cynical and like, because
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it since I saw it theatrically when it came out. So it'll sort of be, and that was only once. So it'll sort of be like seeing it all over brand new, which will be cool. I'm sure it'll be taking the series in a different direction, a new and more creative direction that nobody asked for. But I'm excited to look at it nonetheless.
and there is one tie. This is the second. It's not exactly a theory, and it doesn't hold up to continuity. But in the opening of Jason Goes to Hell, the FBI are aware of him. They send a team to take him down. In the beginning of Jason X, I don't know if you remember this, but Jason has been put on ice essentially at a government facility in Crystal Lake. So there's this weird kind of thread that someone's trying to tie together of Jason being a tool of the government, almost like the company and aliens trying to capture these creatures to turn them into weapons.
Yeah, I mean, well, the one thing that you just mentioned and you mentioned earlier that we didn't talk about, which I'll just say very quickly, is that the mystique of Jason Voorhees in this film as local kind of cropsy type character, which, as you know, came from real life before it was ever in the burning. Was the legend on the East Coast of this cropsy. I mean, that's what Jason, in my mind, has always been. That he was sort of our regional phantom that maybe meant something to people on the East Coast, but not necessarily the rest of the country. But because we were in the world of America's Most Wanted at the time and all of these track down criminal shows and so forth, that becomes a dimension of this movie. And suddenly this Jason character is just on the most wanted list. I mean, he's a national menace that everybody is aware of. And that's kind of interesting, but it does take the backwoods mystery out of the series, so I not all that effective, I thought.
Not really. Now that you mentioned it, the that America's Most Wanted kind of TV show, I see it as another missed opportunity. I don't think it would have been much to get the rights to use a photo of Robert Englund, but how cool it would have been if, they open up and they're talking about all these, different serial killers, kind of like they did in Natural Born Killers. We have like a slideshow of all different killers, like Ted Bundy and Gacy and all that stuff. And then you just slip in a picture of a young Robert Englund. So like, oh, this is Freddy Krueger before he, went on to haunt people's dreams. That would have been really fun.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you mentioned Oliver Stone's movie and in the Robert Downey Jr. character, certainly in Natural Born Killers, which is as gory as any Friday the 13th at times. I mean, it has all of its bloodlust in it and so forth. But again, as we talked about with James Cameron and the theme of motherhood and aliens, and we're talking about the tabloid TV journalism and getting too close to it in Natural Born Killers. I mean, these are filmmakers that really had something on their mind about it. And in Friday the 13th, it's just used as a tool without really being explored. So it's just interesting.
James Cameron and Oliver Stone present Friday the 13th. I would be all over that.
Well, now that we know there's going to be a green light for a new movie, maybe that will happen. We've heard.
Yeah, you sent me that link from We've Got This Covered, and I've heard dubious things about that site as a source, so I'll cling on to it as a glimmer of hope.
Well, we want people to know that this particular podcast is definitely a source of truth. So anything that you hear said here, when you hear it here, you know that you can take it to the bank. So as soon as it's revealed that it's factual, we'll have it on here. So.
Yes, and we'll gloat too. All right, sir. Well, thank you again. We'll be back very soon to talk about Jason in space, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So take it easy, sir.
Fun. Okay, you too.
All right, bye.
Over and out.
Yay.